there. Thank you for joining me for the latest edition of Telile 24/7. I'm your host, Adam Cook. We've got a busy show for you this week. A little later on, we'll check in with the folks at the Port Hawkesbury Paper Mill in Point Tupper and see what's going on there these days. And we also have an interview with Cape Breton-Canso MP Mike Kelloway about the year past and the year ahead. But first up, we'll complete our series of interviews with Liberal leadership candidates here in Nova Scotia. Here on Telile 24/7, we've already spoken to Ian Rankin and Labi Kasoulas. This time around, we're interviewing another MLA who also recently served in the Stephen McNeil cabinet. He held several portfolios, including environment, finance, education, and health. He is the MLA for Antigonish, and his name is Randy Delorey. Here is that interview right now. We're in the home stretch of the Liberal leadership campaign, the virtual convention set up for February 5th and 6th. How do you personally feel about how things are going at this stage of the campaign, and how do you feel about your chances of victory on the first weekend of February?
I think it's going really, really well. I had a plan that I put in place from the very beginning. It was one that was focused on engagement through the fall and using that engagement with members and stakeholders across the province to inform my policy. That allowed me to build a really strong, robust policy in a number of areas like health, economy, environment, seniors was just rolled out today. And I think that's stronger because I took the time to do that consultation. And I think that's reflective in the feedback I've been getting from members. So I think it's going really, really well.
Can you tell me a little bit about the consultation aspect of it? Because obviously this is a COVID-19 campaign. We all know that. It's not the sort of place where you can go to big rallies or conventions and shake hands or even knock on doors. So how has it been for you? And what do you think you're taking away from this process as you've been finding new ways to reach out to Liberal delegates and to voters in general?
Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right. This is a campaign, a leadership campaign like no other. Although for me, it's the first one I've participated in, so it's what a leadership campaign is. But from those who've been around, obviously, it's a very different. Not as you've mentioned, not having big rallies and communities and so forth. But also the shift. We were in between waves. So earlier in October, when the campaign first started, we were able to get into some communities and do some small, almost kitchen table type of conversations with small groups of Liberal members and stakeholders. But by the time we got into November, I saw the second wave starting. So I announced that I was going to go completely virtual by early mid-November, and I've been doing that ever since. So that shift to fully virtual, although we were doing hybrid earlier and only small group in person, the hybrid has pros and cons. You can never replace being in a room with someone. I think we all know that in our personal lives, in our professional lives, that physical contact, whether it's a handshake or a hug with someone you haven't seen in a while, that's been challenging throughout COVID in many areas, and it's no different here in politics. But on the other hand, it means I haven't had to spend as much time on the road. I could have a meeting with a group in Richmond or Ayrshire, and then right after I finish that video call, I could be meeting with people in Pubnico or Metagan down on the other end of the province, and I'm standing or sitting in the same room. So there are some advantages there, and I was able to reach, I think, more diverse people in that way. Anyone who wanted to connect with me directly had the opportunity. I scheduled meetings with every riding association. So I think it was fantastic that way. But again, it doesn't replace the personal in touch side of things.
Well, that being said, you did decide to run for specific reasons, and I'd like to hear them. Why did you choose now for your first crack at the Liberal leadership?
Well, I think the first thing is, we're at an unprecedented time. I have a unique line of sight on addressing the COVID pandemic. I was the health minister through the first wave and took the lessons we learned from that first wave to prepare our response for the second wave, which was about the time that I made the decision ultimately to step away from health so I could step up to put my name forward to be the leader of the Nova Scotia Liberal Party and ultimately Premier of Nova Scotia. And the reason fundamentally for that is, look, I've got a young family. I've got parents that are retired. So I'm your average Nova Scotian living in rural Nova Scotia, working in the city. I've got exposure to both. I see the value and the importance and the beauty of both our urban and rural lifestyles. And again, that same notion of having young children still in the school system and retired parents aging on that side of the equation. So I think I have that lens of what we need to do as a province, how important it is to provide the care for our aging population, but also prepare the province and leave it in better stead for our next generation. I think I have the experience and the vision to make that happen, and I'm doing it for my kids and everybody else's as well.
Your experience in the McNeil government includes 3 key portfolios: finance, health, and environment. Do you get the sense that your experiences here will help you in the decision-making process should you become the Liberal leader next month?
There's no substitute for following evidence. Making informed evidence-based decisions in any area is absolutely critical. And whether that's a lesson I learned in these portfolios and the experience I have, or if it's just my natural background as an academic, having been a professor at St. FX University before I got into politics, it's a technique or an approach I've applied since I came in and started at Environment in 2013, and I've applied it throughout all of my portfolios, and it's worked well. Obviously, when the Premier looked around and said, who's going to tackle our structural deficit, he looked to me when he said, who's going to tackle our healthcare challenges, get us through COVID. It was me that he picked for those roles to guide us forward. So the learnings, again, nothing substitutes for listening to the best advice, having robust conversations, allowing people to disagree with your default position, because that's the way you ensure that you see the potential pitfalls and you can either change the course or at least you go into them with your eyes wide open.
I want to center on health for just a moment, and you've presided over the health department at one of the more difficult periods for that department in Nova Scotia history. Of course, we speak of COVID-19 to begin with, and the difficulties in terms of outbursts in the Halifax area, particularly in Northwood at the long-term care facility in Northwood back in the spring. By the same token, you have presided over the health department during some difficult transition periods for the McNeil government. I look in particular to the closure of 2 hospitals in the urban areas of the Cape Breton Regional Municipality and the reallocation of services for those hospitals to the Cape Breton Regional Healthcare Complex and some other healthcare complexes in the area. Trying to maintain emergency rooms being open across the province, still a difficult challenge. It's been a challenge for many governments of different stripes over the years. What in particular do you bring from having worked on this portfolio, the health portfolio? And for that matter, what do you say to people who have expressed concerns about how things have unfolded in these 2 particular areas of health?
Yeah, so when it comes to COVID, I think, again, where we're at, how we've performed nationally and globally. In fact, I was just reading an article this morning from Germany that was highlighting the success of Atlantic Canada and Nova Scotia that, I think referred to as New Zealand of North America, one of the safest places. I mean, that's consistent. I think New York Times highlighted us as well. We've been recognized internationally for how successful our approach has been. And it goes back to what I said earlier about what I know and my approach. It's following the evidence. It's listening to experts. It's bringing the feedback and experiences from caucus colleagues who represent individual communities from around the province. It's listening to those voices, hearing those concerns, and then bringing that to the table while we're hearing from experts of the recommendations. So when we look at our COVID response, again, I think our success is reflected in that. And I think we did obviously have a devastating outbreak at Northwood, and we dug in and I took a decisive action to give a directive to bring healthcare workers from other parts of the health system to respond to that circumstance. We got it under control as quickly as we could, and then initiated a review by an independent panelist to experts to tell us, how did we do? What could we have done better in light of the circumstances for what we didn't know and what we did know about COVID at the time? And we've taken actions and invested over $26 million to address those recommendations to improve the situation, not just at Northwood, but throughout all of our other long-term care facilities. And then on the other side, taking that advice from healthcare workers in Cape Breton, the same thing. We were being told and advised, this is the approach, the infrastructure at those sites that were going to be phasing out of the healthcare system. represented and were not viable to manage the future of healthcare in that region. And so the commitment was new healthcare facilities in those communities, providing a lot of experience. One of the more exciting ones is in New Waterford. When I mentioned my advocacy around community rural education initiatives, and again, it would have been back when the Richmond school was being closed, one of the things I advocated for was this notion of community hubs. Well, that's exactly what's being established in New Waterford, is a community hub school attached to long-term care facility as well as a health center. Really excited in the community. Now they understand what's being done and how we're going to deliver healthcare within the region.
Final question, and this is a short question that could have a long answer. We'll see. Would you call an election for 2021 if you do ascend to the Liberal leadership on the first weekend of February?
I don't know when an election will be called. Certainly one I can assure Nova Scotians will be called within about 14 months. There must be one by the spring of 22. So there'll certainly be one in all likelihood in either the spring of 21, the fall of 21, or the spring of 22. But at this point, until I get into the seat, we'll have to make an evaluation. First and foremost, priority is COVID. We need to keep Nova Scotians safe, get the vaccine rolled out efficiently and effectively so that we can get our economy back on track and ensure that Nova Scotia businesses and Nova Scotians can continue to put food on the table, take care of their loved ones, and get our lives back to normal and grow this province and ensure that we have a province that everybody can take part of the bounty we have to offer.
All right. We have covered a lot of ground in a short time, and I appreciate you taking some time for me this morning. Did you want to add anything else about all of this just before we wrap up?
No, look, I just appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I appreciate the questions, and I know that this is an election that is for Liberals that was open to Nova Scotians who wish to sign up as delegates, but that deadline has passed. So for all the delegates in your riding, I'd certainly appreciate their vote in February. And if they have any questions, they can reach out to me at votedelorey.com to learn more about my policy positions, and that goes for any Nova Scotian that's in your viewing audience. At votedelorey.com, under updates, you'll see all the policy positions that I'm advancing as a candidate for the Liberal leadership and Premier of Nova Scotia.
Well, we know that under your cabinet portfolios, you had a full plate, and you still have a full plate now as a Liberal leadership candidate and MLA for Antigonish. We appreciate you taking some time for us. Thank you so much, Randy Delorey, for joining us on Telile 24/7 today.
Thank you very much.
And just a reminder that you can also catch our interview with Antigonish MLA and Liberal leadership candidate Randy Delorey on the Telile 24/7 podcast. If you want to check out any of our podcast episodes, go to our podcast channel, soundcloud.com/Telile. On we go with Telile 24/7, and we're going to have a wrap-up to a story that we've been following for quite a few weeks now. It all started back on Remembrance Day in November, when District 1 Councillor for Richmond County, Sean Sampson, attended the Remembrance Day ceremonies at Royal Canadian Legion Branch 150. But during one of the quieter moments of the ceremony, Sampson and others in attendance heard the noises of all-terrain vehicles on a nearby roadway. So Sampson wanted to see if there was anything that the municipality or the Provincial Department of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal could do to close off roadways and try to reduce the amount of traffic noise at Remembrance Day ceremonies. Well, after some investigation by Sampson himself and by Richmond County's Director of Public Works, Chris Boudreau, the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal finally got back to the municipality with a final answer. Take a listen.
TIR has sort of weighed in on the request and indicated that the Remembrance Day events would not meet the policy on road closure. So I don't know how we want to move forward from here. It's policy on their part that they were not able to go forward with our request.
CEO, I'd just like to thank you and staff for looking into that for us, and I guess going forward, again going back to the situation, it had to do with COVID and of course, not having too much traffic during that day, and I don't think there was any ill will when it came to the situations that did occur that day. So for me, going forward, I can just work with our local Legion members and bring awareness to the situation. So maybe just put up a few signs saying Remembrance Day ceremonies taking place for the next 30 minutes or so. Put a sign in the ATV trail, just to bring awareness to the ATV riders for that 30 minutes or so. So that's something I can do on my own and work with the Legion members. So again, thank you for looking into that, and we'll go forward from there.
What a difference a year makes in federal politics. At this time last January, Mike Kelloway had only been elected as Cape Breton-Canso's new Member of Parliament for a few months, and he had just been named to the House of Commons Standing Committees on Health and Justice. But suddenly, COVID-19 kicked in, and the resulting social distancing protocols meant that Kelloway had to relearn how to do his job. So we decided to take a look back at the year past and a look at the year ahead with Mike Kelloway. Here's that interview right now. And we're very pleased to welcome back once again to Telile 24/7, the Member of Parliament for Cape Breton-Canso, joining us today from Dominion, Mike Kelloway. Mike, Happy New Year to you, and thank you for joining us again.
Happy New Year to you, Adam, and to your family and to your viewers.
And right back at you as well, to you and yours as well, too. So we wanted to do this interview as a look back and a look ahead for you. And I mean, obviously, it's almost cliche to say it, that 2020 wasn't the first full year in Parliament that you expected as a Member of Parliament. But it has been a busy one for you, and one in which you have joined two standing committees of the House of Commons and also been very involved in issues both locally and nationally. So when you look back at 2020, what are the key takeaways from you in terms of not only doing this job for the first time, but basically having to learn to redo it and learn to redo it again through the year?
Absolutely. And it's a great question. It's one that I've been asked. And my father, as we've talked about, I think in other broadcasts, Adam, was in charge of mine rescue for the DEFCO mines. And I'm pretty sure my father would have this saying, but I'm pretty sure he lifted it from somewhere else. But he often said to me, with respect to going underground to save lives or sadly to recover people that may have perished in the mines, that crisis reveals character. And I think what we've seen in the past year is that crisis has indeed revealed character from government responses, both federal, provincial, and municipal, but also personal characteristics of leadership and community leadership as well. We've seen an unprecedented pandemic, something we haven't seen since 1918, 1919, and it was scary. And it had an impact on every facet of life, and it continues to do so. But I've seen the best of people. I've seen the best of people to make personal sacrifices in terms of not seeing loved ones. I've seen personal sacrifices of essential workers, and I don't know if it's the redefinition of essential services, but understanding who essential service workers are. That's the person that works at the co-op. That's the person that works at a pharmacy. That's the person that drives the truck from point A to point B. The person that stocked the shelves at your grocery store. It's your nurse, your doctor, your police officer. It's your early childhood educator. There's so many essential service workers that we now have a profound respect for. And we've often go to movies to see the Avengers or to see the Justice League, to look at heroes and mythical characters, and we have them right here. And we have that drive, and we have that passion, and we have that sense of community. And in times of crisis in Cape Breton-Canso, whether you're in Arishat, or whether you're in Shettycamp, or whether you're in Glace Bay, Nova Scotia, or Canso, or Pomquet, we've seen communities come together, and we've seen so many great stories that have come together rather. Individuals who, there was one case of an individual in Glace Bay, a young man in high school who works the cash register at Sobeys, and there was a senior who didn't just have enough money to pay for his groceries. And, the person working the cash register, the high school student, just with no fanfare provided an extra $5, $10 to that individual to be able to purchase the goods that he needed. And we see so many of those examples throughout the riding. So what does me good, what gives me hope, there's a couple of things. One is thanking the constituents for being who they are, caring, loving people who step up in a time of need, and their patience. This is something that's rocked the lives of everybody in one form or fashion. So their ability to help each other, our ability to help each other is absolutely essential. And then I look at some of the, some of the highlights for me, Adam. When we were just about to get into what we now know as the COVID pandemic, we talked a lot about how do we help those that can't access EI, your person that works in the gig economy, the person that owns the small or medium-sized business in rural Canada and rural parts of my riding, if not all parts of my riding. And we talked about how do we help fishers and all the ideas that came from Cape Breton-Canso. We worked with hand in glove, my office, myself, and folks that I just mentioned, to put together some real tangible policy suggestions and recommendations, and one that I use as a benchmark of what our community can do. What our community can do when the naysayers are not winning the day, but the can-doers stand up and are counted for, was around the Fishers Harvester Grant and benefit. Much of what you see that has impacted fishers across from the north to the west to the east coast, much of that, Bill Morneau, the finance minister of the day, talked to me and talked to my office about the fact that it was a lot of what we put forward at their request, working directly with finance and my office and fisheries, that came to be. Now, they weren't Mike Kelloway ideas. They were Carla Sampson ideas, and Gord MacDonald, and Blair Martell, and Herb Nash, and Leonard LeBlanc, across the fishers across the riding, that we took the time, and 7 days a week, there was a period for about 2 to 3 months, no, closer to 3 months, that every day we met with the fishing associations, every day, even Sunday, to work on putting together a package that we thought would benefit. And it did. And the same could be said for CERB. Now, when we put together our policy suggestions, we talked about, we didn't label the acronym CERB, but we talked about those benefits that would help Canadians, because the Prime Minister has said this, and premiers across the country have said the same thing, is that government needs to have the back of Canadians in this time of need. If we don't, then when would be the perfect time to have the backs of Canadians? So I was really impressed with the quickness and the agility and the focus of getting programs out to assist people. I was also equally impressed with the ability of MPs to influence policy, and I was also equally impressed that constituents played such a major role in what we now call, the Canadian response to CERB. Now, did we get everything right? No. I think one of the hallmarks of leadership is humility. And I think that, we look at what we did and what we need to do better and what we need to do more of and what we need to do less of. But so proud, Adam, of my office and our ability to work with constituents, and so proud of the constituents that have reached out to me via Facebook and phone and cell phone and text and Instagram and Twitter to say, we want to be part of the solution. We know that it's a difficult time, but here's some ideas for you. And that gave me such fuel throughout the past 12 months or so. And there's more to do. Look, we're in January now, and January and February will be dark months with respect to COVID. It's often said that it's the darkest before the dawn, but I see light at the end of the tunnel. And the tunnel and the light in particular is around vaccines, and it's around the consistent practices of masks and social distancing and making those personal sacrifices. So many people have made personal sacrifices to keep our communities safe. And there's a leadership author, his name is Simon Sinek, and I was listening to his podcast recently. And he talked about how you can go to any bookstore online or physically now, and you could go to find any section on self-leadership and self-care. There's an abundance of books on it, which is important. But there are very few books on community leadership and looking at and protecting others. And I think what we've seen here is what we can do when we put our mind together with other like-minded individuals for a common purpose and a common goal and a common outcome. So 2020 was a phenomenal year in terms of unprecedented year of challenging times. But I think 2021 we'll see this gradual resurgence to norms, and perhaps even adding new norms to our social practices and economic practices.
Well, something that has become a new norm for the residents of Cape Breton-Canso is the concept of social distancing, of mask wearing, of washing hands, of very low capacity in everything from theaters to supermarkets to restaurants. And I want to ask you a bit about the resilience of your constituents, because we haven't seen a lot of cases in the eastern zone of Nova Scotia in terms of COVID-19. And we've seen quite a bit of a spike in the Halifax area that is finally starting to be whittled down after soaring in November and the early part of December. But I'm just curious. I mean, obviously, there are all kinds of factors to this, including travel and travel related spreading of COVID-19. But why do you think it's worked so well in Cape Breton and in northeastern Nova Scotia, in your constituency, that residents are willing to do these measures and to make those sacrifices to be able to stop the spread of the disease?
To some degree, I think it's in our DNA as majority of rural communities to look after your neighbor, to look after your friend, to be your sister's keeper and your brother's keeper. I think some of that is in our DNA. Some of it is passed on from generation to generation, and it's also the power, quite frankly, of rural communities to have a working knowledge of people in your community and who they are, and where they are in their own life, whether it's a senior in a seniors complex, whether it's someone living on their own with challenges and difficulties, and just knowing your neighbor well enough to have a common bond. And I think rural Canada, and in particular Cape Breton-Canso, has that. I know other MPs have often said, here goes Mike Kelloway talking about Cape Breton-Canso again, but there's a reason for it. I'm proud of the people of Cape Breton-Canso. I'm proud of what they've achieved and what they continue to achieve, because there is a fundamental crossroads in times like this, whether it is this pandemic, World War I, World War II, the Depression, and the last pandemic, a worldwide pandemic and the Spanish flu, is that you have two paths fundamentally. You have the selfish path and you have the selfless path. And it's not an easy choice, because you want to maintain the norms and you want to be able to live your life the way you did before early March of last year. So these are where personal sacrifices have come into play, but it tells you what's inherent: the importance of family, the importance of community. And I think we have that in rural Canada. And I think in my riding and your riding, you know, for the most part, who lives in your community, and you work with those individuals. How many stories did I see throughout the riding of individuals who, of their free time, said, you know what, I know you're not in Cape Breton, but I'm going to go to the window of the seniors complex and take a picture of your mother who's there and send it to you so you have it. That's amazing. Or I'm going to go to the window and Zoom your mother through the window so you can see it in Fort Mac. These are the things we hold on and true, but they're only as good. The practices and the beliefs and the attitudes are only as good as the follow through. So when I hear, social distancing and masks are an infringement on individual liberty, for example, I look at that. I look at the collectivity, the collection of people, and how we need to look after each other more. And we do that in Cape Breton-Canso quite well. And quite frankly, we believe in things like science. We believe, when Dr. Strang or Dr. Tam says, here are the practices that you need to follow through on, we do that. Science matters. Community development and community compassion and community action matters. And we live it. And sometimes I think we don't think we do, but we do. And I think that's evidence of what we've done here. And also bear in mind that, the premiers of Atlantic Canada have played a fundamental role as well in terms of the Atlantic bubble. And I also think, too, ensuring that vaccines are flowing out right now, and ensuring that the federal government stood up when it needed to stand up. 8 out of $10 spent on COVID is federal dollars that have found its way and will continue to find its way in provincial coffers, and whether it's the Safe Start initiative or other health related initiatives, or the CERB or the CEBA. This is a time for us to stand up, and it has been, and it continues to be, that government needs to stand up to protect the backs of Canadians, but Canadians have been standing up to protect the backs of Canadians.
You mentioned Dr. Strang and Dr. Theresa Tam a moment ago, and I want to ask you about your role on the Standing Committee for Health. And you were on the committees for health and justice over the past year. Those were two highlights of your first year as our MP. I wanted to ask, are you directly plugged into the conversations happening federally around COVID-19? Is there a direct line between your committee and the work of Dr. Tam and the Minister Patihadu? What can you tell me about how your role and how the committee's role in the health department plays into all that?
The COVID-19 government's response, is the focus of the health committee. So we bring in witnesses from across the country to gather intel on how things are going, what things need to be done. And part of the role of myself as an MP on the committee is to be able to ask questions, be able to provide insight through whether it is potential community solutions or ideas, and bring that forward too. So we're a chance where the experts provide an update and are there to answer questions of both government and opposition, but also for the community to provide its own solutions. And I've done that through the work on mental health. We brought several folks in from mental health nationally to talk about how mental health, it's called an echo pandemic within the existing pandemic, and we need to be prepared for it. So I played a lead role on that, but also just around government's response in terms of funding the provinces to be able to take COVID head on. And so I'm privileged and blessed to be on a committee that during COVID did not miss a beat. We were one of two committees that continue to meet from March right up until now, and really play a fundamental role in asking questions of government, asking updates with respect to government and its work with not just provincial governments, but also municipal governments, First Nations communities, and also working with groups like the World Health Organization and getting updates there as well. And again, I look back at it, Adam, at moments in time. I remember it was probably late February, and Dr. Tam came in to talk about COVID. And this was before COVID became the sole focus of Health Committee. And we had some great dialogue, and I was leaving the committee room and had a chat with her, just a brief chat. And I said, where do you think this is heading? And she said, this is the real deal. This is something that's going to probably in the short, medium, perhaps long-term change the norms of Canadians and how we practice health, not just from a physician standpoint or a healthcare standpoint, but as community members. And she's been right so many times, and so is Dr. Strang. And it's not that they're superhuman; it's that they listen to science as science presents itself, and science can change and adapt and evolve. But it's given me an appreciation for individuals like Dr. Tam and Dr. Strang, but also the civil servants, municipally, provincially, federally, those essential workers that I talked about earlier, a brand new appreciation for how we handle everyday life. And when something enters the atmosphere that causes an abnormality to how we do things, how much more precious that is.
I had just one more question for you at this point, Mike, and it's a follow-up from the last time you and I did an interview for Telile 24/7. We devoted the whole interview to the situation facing the Mi'kmaq moderate livelihood fishery, particularly in Boudreau First Nation. Traps had been seized from the waters of St. Peter's Bay by the local DFO office in October. Since we spoke, more traps had been taken by DFO from the Boudreau fishery near the end of November. Do you have a sense right now of where those talks are going between Boudreau and the Federal Fisheries Minister, Bernadette Jordan. I know you're but one player in all of this, but what sense do you get about how this could move forward in 2021?
Well, I'm cautiously optimistic that it'll be a better 2021 than a 2020. That's for sure. Look, the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans continues to meet with industry and First Nations communities. I'm optimistic that at the end of the day, we'll find a framework by which to work from. And we have some time, January, February, and March, to point this ship in the right direction. One that recognizes a couple of things. One that recognizes the fact that nation-to-nation negotiation continues to happen. Number two, that conservation is critical to any type of framework and any type of resolution that comes out of a framework. Number three, that it wasn't once but twice that moderate livelihood was reaffirmed in terms of First Nations communities. And also, too, that industry has a role to play. Industry has a role to play in terms of providing insight and recommendations around how do we work together. And I can tell you first and foremost, in our riding, the fishing associations, whether they be in St. Peter's Bay or on the west side of the island or northeastern Nova Scotia, have been exceptionally professional, want to be part of the solution. And I can tell you equally, the First Nations communities have been the same. So we need to get to a point that we have a framework by which to work from. And I'm confident that those conversations will provide us the pathway forward. But we will have to continue those discussions, and they continue, and they'll continue with the minister and those stakeholders. But bear in mind that myself, I've been an activist MP and continue to meet with those groups as well to try to bring people closer together, not further apart. And there are those that are out there, whether it is the moderate livelihood topic or the pandemic or the response to the pandemic, that want to divide as opposed to bringing people together. And we need to focus on those that have the common wish and the common goal to bring the collective together. And I think we have more folks than ever that want to do that.
Well, we'll certainly hope for the best in that regard. And on a much lighter note, Mike, as we wrap this up, we know that this is a busy day for you, and we want to thank you for giving us some time here this afternoon. And we want to thank you for giving us time over the first year of Telile 24/7. We're coming on the first anniversary of our new show. And you were the very first politician that we spoke to, and one of the very first two guests on our debut episode nearly a year ago. And this is the sixth time we've spoken over the course of that first year. So I personally and the folks at Telile want to thank you for making yourself available to us. And we look forward to a continued good relationship with you through 2021 and beyond. Thank you again.
Thank you, Adam. I'm a big fan of Telile and the ability to talk to you and to have great questions that impact the lives of people throughout the riding, and getting that out is exceptionally important. And I appreciate your efforts as well.
No trouble at all. Thanks again for making some time for us. Mike Kelloway is the Member of Parliament for Cape Breton-Canso. We've been speaking to him from one of his offices, this one in Dominion in the CBRM. Stay tuned for more Telile 24/7 in just a moment. If there's one person that's seen the growth of the forestry industry in Nova Scotia over the past decade and seen it from several different angles, it's Alan Eddy. He's currently the Business Development Manager for Port Hawkesbury Paper's mill in Point Tupper. But previously, he served as a Deputy Minister for the Department of Natural Resources, now known as the Department of Lands and Forestry. With this in mind, Richmond Municipal Council invited Eddy to speak at their recent Committee of the Whole meeting to give some insight on the history of Port Hawkesbury Paper in this area and to talk a little bit about what the mill is looking at for the future. Here's that presentation by Alan Eddy right now.
I think when you see this first slide and you look at the bottom, and strong community is probably, as municipal leaders, what you're most interested in. And as a company, we kind of see the recipe that gets us to those strong communities. As it starts right at the base level, which is a diverse ecology. We as a company are very proud of the responsible forestry that we undertake to maintain that diverse ecology. And of course, we believe that that's the underpinnings of our business, which leads to the healthy economy. And if you can put those three things together, you're a long way down the road towards strong communities. That's actually on your screen is a quote, and I should have attributed it to Ron Stern, who, as you all know, is one of our owners. And I guess it's worth reading out for folks at home. We are on a mission to make Port Hawkesbury Paper the highest quality and most competitive producer of super-counted paper in North America, while at the same time being a great place to work, environmentally responsible, and a strong contributor to the province of Nova Scotia. We're in our 9th year of operation now as Port Hawkesbury Paper, and we wanted to, just before Christmas, we had sent this out to folks, and Amanda was very gracious and said it would be a good thing to come and talk to it directly to council. Very pleased to do that because we're very proud of what the company has contributed to this point and what we think is the future going forward. So I'm sure most of you in this room in 2012 were very attuned to what was going on at the mill and do it. I can share with you that at that time I was employed with the government of Nova Scotia, and I lived through all three versions of the deal that finally came to be. I remember particularly being in the Premier's office on an all-night session when the first time it got done, and then we all know that there were some challenges with that. And I remember very well waking up at about 6:30 on a Saturday morning, having been told the day before that that was it, the deal was done, and looking at my BlackBerry only to see a request for information. What's that all about? And so that began a very feverish day, and again, I know that culminated that evening with the announcement that the deal had been done and that Port Hawkesbury Paper would be restarting. And the reason that was possible, I know from a lot of both, the owner's perspective and their interest in the company, and also the government's support of it, was the state-of-the-art technology that facility represents. That was what really had everybody's interest at the time, and that's been the key to making it. That and the strength of the people. And I think that's a tribute to Richmond County and to the surrounding counties in eastern Nova Scotia. It's the people that make that business. So in 2013, I know when the deal was signed, there were a lot of skeptics and people feeling, oh, well, this is just another one of these Nova Scotia stories. Somebody comes to town, convinces the government to put a lot of money on the table, and then they'll pack up and run just as soon as they'll take what they can and run. And of course, 2013, I think the company very quickly set about addressing those issues with the kinds of actions that you see there. $5 million to optimize the wood processing process, $400,000 in technology upgrades, working on, at the time, which was a significant issue coming out of the natural resource strategy, was around clear cutting and modifying our forestry practices. All of that to begin to give confidence to the people of Nova Scotia, and certainly eastern Nova Scotia, that Port Hawkesbury Paper was serious and was here to stay. In 2014, again, just a sign of the strength of the commitment of Stern Partners, capital investments in excess of $15 million. All of those significant in terms of generating employment in eastern Nova Scotia. And the other piece is, and I guess as municipal leaders, at the end of the day, this is a piece that interests most people in politics, and that's, well, what's the tax revenues? Because we know that, much as it's in taxes and one other thing are an inevitability of life, it is what makes so many things possible. And so in 2014, just 2 years after starting, we saw tax revenues of all types amount to $23 million annually, a very significant contribution. And economic studies at the time estimated 1,000 full-time equivalent jobs in both the mill and woodlands, providing about $24 million in direct labor income. So there's that piece that accrues to the public purse, which is of course very important, but there's also that piece that drives the local economy in terms of direct funds that are being poured in through the labor income. I said at the beginning we're very proud of the responsible forestry practices our company has. And of course, the mill, through previous owners, I think has a long-standing reputation from its Scandinavian roots for the type of forestry that's been practiced, leading-edge stuff. And of course, part of the agreement with the province was that we would seek third-party certifications, and in 2015 we reached those certifications. And of course, one of the reasons that happened in 2015 and not 2013 is it takes time for those things. You have to have a bit of a track record for them to assess. And at that time, we had 3 separate certifications for the forestry stewardship, and which is probably more of a European standard, although here in North America, also SFI and the PFC chain of custody systems, all of which collectively give people from some confidence. It's not just what Port Hawkesbury Paper says, well, aren't we wonderful people and we're doing a great job. These are third-party experts whose job it is. They have no dog in the fight, if you will. Theirs is just to say, these are the standards, are they being met? And we have, since that time, successfully maintained all of those certifications. Another piece that I think that's very important is the focus on opportunities for employment and partnerships, as well as research and innovation projects with local universities. I think, probably in the last few years, you couldn't have a conversation in government without the word innovation being there somewhere. And if you did, it didn't last very long. It is a key focus, continues to be. It means different things to different people. But again, I said early on that the success of the business is largely due to the quality of the people that come from this region and support us both directly in the business and as our supply chain. And of course, some of that is that innovative thinking and approaches that have new solutions to old problems and new ways of doing things. Very important to any business to prosper in today's world. And of course, as I said, there's lots of different kinds of innovation. There's business system innovation, there's technology innovation, there's product innovation, just to name 3. And the company has been very active in all 3 of those. In fact, they basically redid the product line since it's been reopened. And we have 2 or 3 products that are unique in the marketplace. So what's next on that journey? We said we were looking to be a great place to work. Industrial safety is a huge focus for any successful operation. And of course, in 2016, we achieved 1,500 days of operating with no lost time accidents. And then, for those of you that have been to the mill and have some concept of the size and complexity of that operation, that was a very, very significant achievement. Employee absenteeism below the national average, less than 2%. Again, I think that speaks to the fact that most people see it as a great place to work. Again, very conscious of our place in the province and here in Cape Breton and Unama'ki, and having signed a 5-year management agreement with the Confederacy of Mainland Mi'kmaq, and then subsequently with the Unama'ki Institute, Resource Institute, were very important milestones, and we continue to work very closely with those relations. And again, did I mention taxes? 24, it continued to grow, and we're generating more than 24 million in annual tax revenue for the province and the people of Nova Scotia. 2017, 5 years, way past what a lot of people thought the thing was going to do. Continuing now to really look at how do we partner with our local universities to go beyond the core business, which is the paper business. And of course, many of you knew my predecessor, Mark Dubé, who worked very hard in this front. And I have done my best to sort of pick up the flag that Mark, and the trails that Mark had blazed. And we continue to look at some significant opportunities to bring more employment and economic development to the area. COVID, like everyone else, it's put a bit of a freeze on some things, but we're quite hopeful that this year we'll see some exciting developments that we'll be able to share with you at the appropriate time. again, something that we were quite proud of there is the fact that it wasn't, again, just us feeling good about ourselves, that obviously the story was getting out and other Nova Scotians were recognizing that PHP was an important contributor to both the Strait area and the general provincial economy. And I guess that's part of the reason why we do want to celebrate, is because we want, continued success relies on the support of our communities and our partners. And so I think it's important that people hear what has happened and see the potential for what can happen. An important piece in 2018 is that if you do the math on those kinds of taxes, and you realize that the provincial contribution, which was somewhere in the order of, depending on how you do the math, in the 120 to 125 million dollars was committed, at that point, 2018 would have all been paid back, and going forward, all those tax revenues now occur. The investment has been repaid in 6 years, which is pretty good return on investment in most areas, and from there forward, those taxes all accrue directly to the benefit of the communities, provincially and municipal, and to some extent federal. I spoke earlier about innovation and new approaches to new things. This is a little bit of an inside baseball story. You say, who cares about kraft pulp? Again, for those of you that have been to the mill or have heard the stories, you know that one of the things that is referenced often is what a high productivity mill that is. And basically you have a sheet of paper that's almost 10 meters wide. The actual path through the machine is almost 400 meters by the time it goes up and down through all the rolls, and it's doing that at basically 100 kilometers an hour. And that goes on almost 24/7, 365. So the strength of that is very important. And the strength comes from the fibers that come, the pulp fibers. And one of the things that most of the world that has a similar process to us, which is TMP or thermomechanical pulp, they always introduced a certain amount of kraft pulp into that process, and the reason for that kraft pulp was to provide strength to the sheet, so that in fact it could operate like that. The nature of kraft pulp is such that compared to thermomechanical pulp, it takes twice as many trees to make the same amount of pulp. And the reason for that is that wood has sort of three fundamental components. Water, obviously, like every living thing that, when it comes to wood. And then it's cellulose and lignin. In the case of kraft, what happens is they separate the cellulose and the lignin, and they only use the cellulose component, which is roughly 50% of the wood. So you can see why that takes twice as much. If you're using twice as much wood, stands to reason that it's a little bit more expensive. Kraft pulp is a little bit more expensive. From an input perspective. But it does have a significantly higher impact because it takes more trees to do. And so one of the things that the company was very focused on was reducing that amount of kraft in our process, both because it was a competitive advantage, from a cost perspective. When you're in a very tough market, you have to do everything you can. But it also really has an impact on our footprint, environmental footprint. And so in 2019, we were successful in eliminating the kraft pulp, and now our paper is made 100% of the pulp that is produced right there at the plant in Point Tupper, and so that's both reduced our costs and reduced our environmental input. And we are virtually the only that we're aware of, certainly the only ones in North America, and we believe the only ones in the world that have accomplished this feat. So when we talk about the quality of people and the innovation that's gone on at that mill, that's a classic example of it. In 2020, we became one of the top 3 Nova Scotia-based exporters, shipping through the Port of Halifax. We've developed a flexible power arrangement, and again, all of you that have been close to the mill story know that one of the key things about TMP pulp is that it takes a huge amount of power. It substitutes mechanical force for the chemical breakdown that's involved in a kraft process, to the point that we are roughly 10% of the electric demand in Nova Scotia. So anything that can be done to adjust that either demand or the cost of that is a significant issue to the business. It also represented a tremendous opportunity to the utility, because as we move to green power, one of the challenges with wind is how do you balance that on the grid, because you can't store wind. So if you have something that you can use to change your demand up and down, it allows you to use more of that wind when it's available, or to reduce the amount of coal that needs to be dispatched. And so last year, well, actually, I guess, yeah, just a year ago in January, the new rate was approved through the Utility and Review Board. It's unique, again, in North America, and it provides benefits to the rate base in general, so to each of us as citizens of Nova Scotia, because virtually all of us use power from Nova Scotia Power, with the exception of a few smaller municipal utilities. It provides benefits to Nova Scotia Power itself, and benefits to our company in terms of sharing the savings that are possible by being able to shift the load around by the utility. So again, another example of how important innovation is to the success of Port Hawkesbury Paper at all levels, whether it's technology, whether it's process, or whether it's business systems. And I guess the last bullet there is just, again, is while I was emphasizing the tax story there simply because, again, wanted the big build up to the fact that, you know, it has been, we feel, a very good investment, both as a company and as a province, and we hope that you feel that as a municipality, that it's benefited you. But there you see it, 1.4 billion, that's with a B. That's a pretty significant level of economic activity. That's since the facility opened in 2012 as Port Hawkesbury Paper, and that's not including the employee wages. So, you know, when we say that we believe we're a significant economic engine for Eastern Nova Scotia, and particularly the Strait region, I think a figure like that lends credence to that statement. So again, we're very pleased to have celebrated that 8 years of success, and it says "and counting" because we certainly see looking forward to the future. I guess the other thing that we saw just in 2020, bleeding into 2021, was once again the opportunity to contribute to the Strait Regional Hospital and to the community. You know, under previous ownership, the employees at the mill were very pleased to be part of the funding drive that helped establish the hospital the first time around. And as a company, we were very, very pleased to be able to be part of it, once again, the most recent fundraising drive.
Now, Alan Eddy finished up his presentation on behalf of Port Hawkesbury Paper by talking about the Point Tupper Mill's contributions to the local healthcare scene. And we're going to stay on that topic for just a moment as we wrap up Telile 24/7 this week, because another presentation was made at the recent Richmond Council Committee of the Whole regarding physician recruitment for our area. It was presented by the committee known as Cape Breton South Recruiting for Health. The delegates were former Port Hawkesbury Town Councillor Trevor Boudreau, a longtime front person for the committee, and Maggie MacDonald, who is the committee's healthcare recruitment navigator. They addressed the history of the Cape Breton South Recruiting for Health Committee and its efforts over the past year, but they also spoke to a question from Richmond Warden Amanda Mumberket about the need for proper housing for potential new doctors and nurses in the Strait area. Here's that conversation right now.
Housing is my #1 challenge, definitely, in both areas, so the town of Port Hawkesbury and Richmond. So what I'm finding, most healthcare professionals who I'm in contact with daily often want to be housed around the town of Port Hawkesbury or close to Evanston, I guess, where the Strait Hospital is located. And yeah, housing is not easy to find. Here, it's very spread out in Richmond County, as you all know. Port Hawkesbury, you can find it, but it's not, how do I say, up to par. You know, I wouldn't recommend it for you know, healthcare professionals to come and be happy here. So you might want to add to that.
And certainly, other parts of the province have recognized this as well. So an example is in Yarmouth. What has happened there is actually one of the credit unions in the community actually stepped up with some businesses and said, you know what, this is important. We will need to attract and retain physicians in our area. And so they've created a building where they have apartments and also a space for residents, for medical students, for people coming into work. And so that has been a very important part for them, and they recognize that early. And I think you're seeing this across the board. So, these healthcare providers who are interested in potentially moving here don't necessarily have the luxury of just coming and taking a tour around always. So they're looking for housing right away. I mean, we had a couple of nurses that were looking early on, and thank you to Amanda for helping us out finding some. But really, it comes down to we're scattered, and we're I just gave Maggie a heads up. I just got a message from someone else looking for housing, and so this is while I'm sitting here. So this is an ongoing issue, and one that I think we all need to work on to address. And if it's not just for these professionals. Obviously, this is something bigger.
I really think it's important for us to bring that to light, and maybe there is some kind of connection we could make with the Straight Richmond Housing Coalition as well, just, in terms of understanding what the inventory of property is like out there.
And that wraps up this week's edition of Telile 24/7. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you to my guests this week, Mike Kelloway and Randy Delorey. And a big thank you to my Telile colleagues, Becky Bourinot, Nick Boudreau, and Cora LeBlanc, for producing the footage from Richmond Council's recent Committee of the Whole. We'd love to hear from you if you have any comments or thoughts about this show, or some ideas or suggestions for future editions of Telile 24/7. You can contact me directly. My phone number is 902-625-8863, and you can always send me an email. That address is adamjrcook, cook with an E, @gmail.com. You can also contact Telile directly. The station phone number is 902-226-1928. Send your emails to Telile at the address info@telile.tv. Don't forget to follow Telile on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Our YouTube channel features several new programs that have been produced at Telile over the last little while, as well as every single episode of Telile 24/7, including this one and our sister French program, Notre Côté. And don't forget to check out our podcasts on Telile's new podcast channel, soundcloud.com/Telile. I'm Adam Cook. Thank you again for joining me, everybody. I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time with a brand new edition of Telile 24/7. Talk to you then.